flood-plagued Toronto neighborhood now complaining about raw sewage backing up on their street.
It was like a bathroom, and you watch it flow down the street.
Why they think it's connected to that nearly 2-year rescue operation of a boring machine underground, and what intel we're learning from the city about the cleanup.
Transparency is good, but it's not going to solve problems.
Plus, the wrong fix? Why some are arguing plans to force wage transparency on job listings in Ontario will do nothing to help the gender pay gap.
Cities across the country have noted rising vacancy rates.
And fighting against shuttered shops, we'll show you the new push to extend financial relief for some businesses, how it could help Toronto's downtown. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover, getting you started tonight in a West Toronto neighborhood we have been to a time or two over the past couple of years. The site of that boring machine that was trapped underground. It took city crews nearly 2 very loud and messy years to get that piece of equipment out. And now, just a couple of weeks after the successful rescue mission was finally completed, residents say they have been slapped in the face with yet another far smellier problem. Anam Khan has our top story tonight.
After nearly 20 months and millions of dollars spent to rescue a machine stuck underground, residents in this High Park neighborhood thought their saga was over. But now they say their problems have gotten worse.
This smells like poop.
That is so disgusting.
Raw sewage spilling onto their street.
You see visible excrement, you see toilet paper, you see human waste coming up, you smell it. It smells like a bathroom, and you watch it flow down the street. It's flowing again directly into the Humber River.
Tanya Boswick believes this is connected to the boring machine saga, which has haunted residents for months. Spring of 2022, a boring machine was trapped under Old Mill Drive while trying to dig a new storm sewer to avoid the subway. Initially expected to cost $9 million. 20 months later, and the city's latest cost for the rescue mission was $25 million.
I used to only hear it in my basement. Now I hear it in my bedroom at night.
I don't know if you can hear that, but I can definitely feel the vibrations of the subway beneath my feet. And some of the residents tell me it's gotten louder since they pulled the boring machine out. And for the neighbors just along the subway line here, they tell me they can feel their plates rattle when it goes by.
We asked the city if the noise and the sewage problems were connected to the boring machine saga, but the city did not respond. Local councillor Gord Perks couldn't do an interview tonight, but shared with CBC News intel he and the city have been providing residents. The sewage overflow problem was first reported just over a week ago. Toronto Water flushed and inspected the sewer system in the area, and city staff are still working on a plan to prevent this sort of mess from happening in the future. The city also says a water truck is thoroughly washing the affected areas, but it's all too much for too long for some.
It's unfortunate to say I'm almost used to it.
Many left wondering when and now if their ongoing headaches will end. Anam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
Taking you now to George Brown's College's downtown campus, where Toronto's housing affordability crisis is squeezing students into difficult situations. City Hall reporter Sean Jeffords shows us what the college is now trying to do about it.
It's very small, like there is no privacy. I can hear all my friends' conversation when it's happened, so I didn't feel it like it's even a place can I study.
International student Hala Al-Jamali describes the crowded apartment she was forced to rent when she first arrived in Canada. She paid $1,250 a month to share a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other students. The landlord had converted the apartment's living room into another bedroom.
It was so difficult, so challenging when I came here, especially for international student. We don't know anybody.
In Toronto's competitive housing market, students are put under extra pressure. Landlords can be very selective about who they rent to, and the conditions in some spaces are substandard. Some landlords ask students for a year's rent in advance. Eventually, Al-Jamali found a better place, but it took her 7 months.
I try as much as I can to move from it because it was not feel safe at all.
George Brown Vice President Joe Cressy says Al-Jamali's story is a familiar one, and that's why the school formed a housing task force to investigate and come up with solutions. The school surveyed hundreds of students and found they're often facing high costs and unsafe conditions. The task force also found the college is struggling with recruitment and retention issues because its workers can't find affordable housing near the campus.
If we're going to succeed as an institution, if we're going to succeed as a city,
We need to provide more housing options to workers and students alike.
When many colleges were opened in the 1960s, they were viewed as local community schools, so they didn't build student residences to the same degree as universities. Here at George Brown, they have one residence, and it opened in 2015. But Housing Now TO technical lead Mark Richardson says George Brown's housing problem isn't isolated to that campus. It stretches even to post-secondary institutions with more housing stock.
The affordable housing crisis for students affects the affordable housing crisis for the whole city.
George Brown's task force is now considering how the school could build more housing for students and workers alike. It's expected to report back with solutions next year. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
And not far from George Brown's downtown campus, the city announcing today a new supportive housing project will be built.
43 people are going to find hope, going to find a place to heal, find a place that they can call home.
Those units will be shared between two supportive housing locations, one near George Brown by Dundas and Parliament, the other on the downtown west side near Spadina and Queen. For the projects, the city is partnering with the YMCA and St. Jude Community Homes with funding help from the federal government. Residents will have access to on-site staffing along with a range of mental health services. And the mayor says there are nearly 30,000 people on Toronto's waiting list for supportive housing. Now to an effort meant to clean up Ontario's persistent gender pay gap. Companies operating in the province will soon be required to disclose their salary range on job postings. More transparency is meant to mean more wage fairness. But as Lorenda Redekop explains, not all labor experts are convinced the change will help.
Provincial numbers show women on average earn 87 cents for every dollar a man makes. The Minister of Labour is proposing a change he says can fix that.
Including salary ranges with job postings can help close the gender pay gap while allowing companies to find qualified candidates faster and improve retention.
The province of British Columbia recently made the same change for all job ads as of November 1st.
Transparency is good, but it's not going to solve problems.
Law professor Valerio De Stefano would like to see full disclosure of what people are actually paid.
If a company has a great candidate and they want to offer more than the salary range that they initially published, they are still going to do that, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if those decisions are affected by gender, for instance, this is not going to solve the gender wage gap.
He says the pay gap among women and men doing the same job is only one part of the problem. The jobs traditionally done by women are less valued. He says a hospital nurse, for example, is often paid less than an accountant. The government also plans to require companies to disclose when they're using AI, artificial intelligence, in their hiring process.
This will make Ontario one of the first jurisdictions, along with a handful of others in North America, to do this.
A few years ago, an AI program used by Amazon was unintentionally biased against women. Once again, De Stefano says more than just disclosing the use of the program is needed.
This is Amazon, so it's a giant tech company. Imagine a run-of-the-mill employer that just buys or leases this software without understanding anything on how they work. The risk these employers are sitting on are enormous.
The government says it will introduce legislation soon on these proposed changes. The opposition would like to see more done to address gender wage gaps. And it wants to see enforcement, reporting, and tracking to ensure greater pay equity. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
12 degrees and cloudy as we look live at Queens Quay and Spadina. So late in the evening to be this unseasonably warm, especially as we approach midnight, Colette. It certainly felt like it looked like midnight out there many hours ago tonight.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. I mean, I think we all noticed it getting dark so early. We tend to really, I think, focus on that more than, all right, we're getting the sun a little earlier in the morning than where it was. Yeah, so just looking at those daylight hours take you into tomorrow. The sunrise will be at 7 a.m. Look at how these line up right at the top of the hour because the sunset tomorrow at 5 p.m. And just in terms of that system we've had working its way through, even though most of the rain has left us, still dealing with some of that cloud, the odd isolated shower, but also dealing with the winds, which are having an impact too on the temperature. So that temperature nearly steady, or it's even coming up a little bit over the next few hours, and then it will start to fall tomorrow towards the afternoon hours. So some weird things going on there, are just a little bit different in terms of the timing. It'll be late tomorrow into the evening before we start to see those breaks developing, so not expecting any sunny breaks because of the sunset time. 11 overnight tomorrow afternoon, that temperature dropping. And then, speaking of interesting weather, I have to show you what may be happening on Wednesday. That's all coming up.
Oh, good tease. All right. Thanks, Colette. We'll talk to you again in a few. Now to a new concern over shop vacancies in downtowns across the country, including Toronto's, and a new push tonight to extend financial relief to struggling businesses. Dale Manukduk has that story.
You might not notice at first glance, but on this busy stretch of Yonge Street from Wellesley to Dundas, several storefronts sit empty. Whatever used to be there is replaced by metal fencing, brown paper obstructing the windows, padlocks, and an array of for lease signs. But these pet store owners didn't see metaphorical tumbleweeds rolling through. They saw opportunity.
You can see a lot of new condos are building up in this area, and I believe there is a huge potential market in this area for the kind of a pet shop. Yeah.
Less optimistic, the International Downtown Association of Canada.
Cities across the country have noted rising vacancy rates in their downtown business districts. Edmonton with a 33% rate, Halifax at 13, Montreal 11, Toronto 14.
The IDA is calling on the federal government to extend repayment on federally backed loans so more businesses aren't shuttered. The Canadian Emergency Business Account, or CEBA, launched in April 2020 at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses were offered zero-interest loans of up to $60,000 through the program. Up to $20,000 would be forgiven if the rest was repaid by a certain date. In September, the Prime Minister announced a one-year extension to pay it back by the end of 2026.
That initial announcement was absolutely misleading. It was actually only 18 days while the government focused on the extension to pay off the full amount of the loan without accessing the forgivable portion.
The key date that allows businesses to access the forgivable portion was only extended from December 31st of this year to January 18th, 2024. If a business misses that deadline, they're on the hook for everything plus interest.
I'm just driving Uber.
Barkat Banwadia owns a convenience store inside Toronto's Underground Path. He's in a car right now because he's driving Uber full-time to supplement his income. He says foot traffic in the path is well below what it used to be. On Mondays and Fridays, he says people often work from home, and it's unlikely he'll make the January deadline.
And we didn't accumulate a single penny from the business to put towards the CEBA loan because the expenses is high, and so we cannot save anything.
A spokesperson for Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, tells CBC Toronto in part, the bottom line is that if you are a small business and do not currently have the funds to repay your CEBA loan, you now have 3 years to repay it in full. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
To the city's East End now, where a man is dead and another is injured after a shooting at an apartment building this afternoon near Kingston Road and Galloway in Scarborough just after noon. A second person was also found with gunshot wounds. He was originally detained before being taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, and police wouldn't say if they were looking for additional suspects. That fatal shooting coming as Toronto's and police services across Ontario mark the beginning of Crime Prevention Week. Toronto's police chief says the city is seeing a rise in hate since the Israel-Hamas war, so they're realigning resources to address that problem.
The most alarming trend is the incredible rise in incidents of hate crimes, anti-Semitism, anti-Islamophobia that we're seeing. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We're going to do everything possible to hold those responsible accountable.
Crime Prevention Week's theme is awareness, engagement, and prevention. The goal is to create safer communities through partnerships with local organizations and community leaders. Welcome back. Questions are swirling tonight around the Ford government's plans to create a bank to fund public construction projects in Ontario. The infrastructure bank would finance things like long-term care homes and student housing through private investment. Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, has more on what it could mean for taxpayers.
I am pleased to announce that today our government is launching the Ontario Infrastructure Bank. Here, here.
The showpiece announcement of the government's mini budget, a brand new provincial bank to finance big capital projects.
The bank will attract trusted institutional investors to help finance essential infrastructure that would otherwise not get built.
Let's break down what the finance minister means.
The bank will attract trusted institutional investors.
The government is mainly talking about big Canadian pension funds, but it's not ruling out private equity firms
to help finance essential infrastructure.
Long-term care homes are at the top of the government's list, followed by energy projects and student housing
that would otherwise not get built.
The province's former chief economist says Ontario has never had trouble getting financing to build big projects.
The current system seems to be working pretty well in Ontario, which leads us to the question of what's the problem this is going to actually solve?
So how does Ontario finance big capital projects right now? Just like every other government, it issues bonds, essentially borrowing money from investors and paying them a modest but stable return.
Presumably that means the bank's going to have to offer a return that's a little bit, if not more than a little bit, higher than what the government already offers investors.
Here's how the bank would work differently. It would find investors to put up money for building, say, a long-term care home. Then once that home is occupied, the investors get a share of its revenue.
There is a lot of private capital, particularly institutional capital, really in the mix here in Ontario as well as across the country that is eager to invest in infrastructure in Ontario, but they're looking for the right projects to do so.
Does this open the door for these mega pension funds to be profiting off of public infrastructure investments?
No, I don't think profiting is the right way to think about it.
The Trudeau government created the Canada Infrastructure Bank back in 2017, and the Ford government is using it as a model for Ontario. The federal Conservative Party calls that bank a boondoggle that should be scrapped. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette, back to you and that tease that you were telling us earlier about, I think it was Wednesday, right?
Yeah, why don't we start with this? We'll get through Tuesday and then we'll kind of look at what is going to be coming as we head towards midweek or the chance of into our forecast. So first of all, looking at the recess forecast. So at 10, I do have some rain in here, but only because this particular font, I don't have these icons, a nice little single sprinkle, because that would be about it that should be around. The clouds, however, will be with us. Some breezy conditions as well through the day, and that temperature doing some interesting things because it kind of comes up or is nearly steady. But actually, as we get into the later afternoon, this will be dropping on us. So yeah, a little bit of up and down, and the wind's changing direction too. So we get into some of these clear breaks, but all of this is going to be filling back in with that cloud deck, pretty stubborn, in fact, in terms of what we'll be seeing. So that's what's in play for Tuesday. And we kind of see that system moving on through, and those winds change to the west-northwest behind it. So for tomorrow night into Wednesday morning, that cooler air makes its way through, but then the next system is lining up. And yes, there'll be another warm front that's going to be moving in, but ahead of it, because of the cooler air and that moisture, yeah, we could be seeing towards midday, the afternoon rush hour, maybe some wet flurries or even a bit of light mixed precipitation before the temperatures rise and it changes over to rainfall. So just a little heads up for Wednesday afternoon. In terms of what's left of the rain, most of that with this system is now off towards the east. The winds, however, even though they're changing direction, still keeping with some gustiness there, and so some breezier conditions over the next 24 hours. Those overnight temperatures, yes, from where they are, and then kind of dropping down and leveling off, and then falling into the afternoon. We'll be at 8 degrees by tomorrow afternoon, okay, from that daytime high, and then there's some of that cooler air kind of midweek before it pops up again.
All right, Colette, thank you. Have a great night, and we'll be back in just a moment. Finally tonight, I want to tell you about a new arts and culture hub for some of Toronto's brightest performing artists. B Street aims to provide rehearsal spaces at affordable prices. Welcome news for an industry that is certainly struggling. Tyler Cheese was there for the opening.
This building and B Street exist for one reason, and that is to help artists thrive.
Members of Toronto's theatre and arts community gathered at the corner of Bathurst and Dupont Streets this morning. The occasion, the official opening of a new arts and culture hub.
When artists feel valued, they become courageous. And when they become courageous, they take risks. And when they take risks, they create provocative, beautiful, sublime works of art.
The new space was created to provide affordable rehearsal space for the city's performing artists. And it comes at a crucial time when the community is still bouncing back from the pandemic.
It's come at a time when the arts industry has been hit so hard. You know, it was like we've lost so many spaces. You know, arts workers are leaving the city.
It's been a really tough time for arts and culture. And you read about it and you hear about this sort of ripple effect in the hospitality industry as well. And giving people space and giving people time to create is critical right now.
The Toronto Alliance for the Performing Arts helped create the space and will also operate out of the building. It's hopeful that the new space will contribute to the ongoing recovery of the city's art scene.
There's a slow reemergence happening. Hopefully B Street, some of the work that gets developed here, ends up on stages in Toronto.
Those in the community are excited to make use of the hub, which also includes a recording studio, areas for actors to record self-tapes for auditions, a library, and meeting spaces.
One of the hardest things about being an artist in the city is not the performing of it, it's the making of it. Where do we rehearse? Where do we meet? Where do we develop? And I feel like B Street is going to be a really wonderful resource to help us all create the art that we deserve.
Those involved say they view B Street as more than just a building for artists.
It is a mission to embolden artists to create their most impactful work.
The hub is available to all members of the Toronto Alliance for the Performing Arts, and registry is available on the organization's website. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
Nice way to send you off tonight. That's our show for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, and we'll see you then.